All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Filipino American Woman Project, also known as TIFA Project for short. I am your creator and co-host, Jen Amos. And as always, I don't really have like other verbiage than to just keep saying what I'm saying, Nani. But as always, I have my amazing co-host with me, Nani Dominguez. Nani, welcome back.
Hey, thank you for the intro. We can definitely do some research on that because I don't either. I say the same thing every time too.
Hey, don't fix what's not broken, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I have to say, your audio sounds amazing today.
Thank you. Thank you. Shout outs to my dad for this fancy mic that I am going to start using again.
Yes, we're trying to be a little more professional now on occasion. So,
yeah, on occasion, emphasis on occasion.
Yeah. Well, let me go ahead and do some housekeeping here for our listeners before we introduce our guests. As you know, if you've been following our show now, we are starting a private podcast show called Chismis with Jen and Nani. And if you want to have access to that show and you want to support us, check it out at biasboba.com. We've already had a number of people support us on there. We already released original content, such as our conversation with Nani's dad on Father's Day. And we have way more to come, including even my own personal drama in my life and my experiences. It's going to be great. But yeah, if you want to support us, biasboba.com. And if this conversation compels you in any way to reach out to us, we do have a phone number, 415-484-8329. Once again, that's 415-484-8329. Leave us a text or entertain Jen. She's begging you now, because no one's done this yet, to leave a voice message. I'd love to hear your voice. And of course, if you would prefer to email us, we do have emails. Jen at tifaproject.com and Nani at tifaproject.com. That's JEN at TFAWproject.com and NANI at tifaproject.com. All right, that's it. I think that's all the updates I have. Of course, remember to subscribe to our mailing list. We haven't brought this up recently, Nani, so just remind people why they want to be a part of our mailing list.
Yeah, our newsletter, our weekly newsletter is really where we have moved all of our focus and attention to. I know that a lot of you guys used to interact with us a lot on Instagram, and we used to post a lot on our stories kind of on a daily basis and constantly be on there, just community building with you guys. And so that is our newsletter is where we're doing that now. And we include all kinds of goodies for you guys in there, including just like a personal message to you, keeping a pulse on the community in terms of news and politics updates, which our lovely interns help us with from the Below Sun Center at UC Davis, media that Jen and I are featured in outside of the podcast, updates on our latest project, Chismis with Jen and Nani, and other things that we've worked on. Jen and I are really expanding our gamut of things that we work on now outside of the TIFA project. And so, yeah, with all the kind of media things that we focusing on, we put updates for you guys in there to learn about. And then, of course, links and everything to watch on YouTube or listen on the podcast to their latest episodes and fun resources for you guys to check out that are just meant to uplift the community.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that, as you always eloquently do. And of course, you can subscribe by checking out the show notes of this episode, or obviously visiting our website at TFAW, that's tifaproject.com. All right, that's all our updates. We are going to bring on our guest today. I am really excited. This is actually one of my local friends here in Virginia Beach that I've managed to be able to make and keep. So conversation for another time, Chismis with Jen and Nani. So let me go ahead and introduce her. We have with us Melody Agbisit, who is a counselor, educator, social entrepreneur, and writer. And before we really get into this conversation, go on your Instagram account right now and add her. Her Instagram account is Melo Mahalo, which is spelled MELOMAHALO. So without further ado, Melody, welcome to the show.
Yay. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I know this is like a very obvious question, but why don't you start by sharing, how did you hear about the show and what compelled you to join us?
How did I hear about the show? Well, I think you were stalking me, Jen.
It's probably true.
Sounds about right.
Joking, but I mean, I've seen you a lot in like the military community groups and also like the Filipino groups. And I think somehow we became Facebook friends. Yeah. I don't know how that came about, but one of us friended each other, just like, I guess, seeing each other's content. I got interested in what you were doing. You seemed to be interested in what I was doing. And I guess that's how I learned about this.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm really glad that you decided to, join us. And it's kind of interesting because like I literally don't remember how we added each other. I don't know who added one another, but I just remember that for some reason I just had it in me to know that I wanted to talk to you and connect with you. And in my mind, I already saw you as a friend. Like, and maybe that's just because of the mindset I was in at the time where I was wanting to make friends and trust people and put myself out there. And because I think that if there's anything I picked up moving out here is just what everyone's calling this Southern hospitality, where anyone and everyone just talks to you as if they've known you forever. And I remember it was an initial culture shock for me to have people just wave at me from across the street or say hi or just have random conversations. I don't know this person, And I remember when we first moved here, all our neighbors came to introduce themselves and say hi and say, why do we come here? So I think that with that spirit in mind, I just kind of automatically saw you as a friend, not even remembering the original like reason, and it just kind of happened. And, long and behold, we ended up getting along and here we are.
Yeah. Like one thing I do remember though is at the time when we did become friends, I was really active in promoting one of my projects that has been put on hold because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was the original reason you wanted me to come on to this podcast. I have this project called Rerooted Filipinas. It's more than a cultural tour. It's cultural, educational, and environmental. So praying that that happens sometime, Philippines opens up and that we can have that tour to just bring Philams back to the Philippines, back.
Yeah, I remember when we were first talking, I think I caught you at the time where it seemed like everything was falling apart in a sense where like all your plans for the year was like completely canceled. And, I think we probably wouldn't have been friends if the pandemic hadn't happened because you probably would have been gone. You probably would have been in the Philippines, right? And like doing your work. And so it's very unfortunate that that happened. But, I think as things are slowly opening up again, I really do hope that you have that opportunity because there is something special to say about Filipino Americans going back to the Philippines. And I know Nani had experienced that at the beginning. That was that was the beginning of 2020, right, Nani? Like your first time going to the Philippines?
I was in the Philippines when COVID broke out. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I was literally in Boracay and all my friends were texting me like, hey, I'm not trying to scare you, but just FYI, there's like people dropping dead and you want to stay away from, big groups of tourists. And I'm literally like, I'm on Boracay, like the most touristy island possible with just mobs of people everywhere. And they're sending me these like CNN Philippines news articles of people just like being carried away in these astronaut like hazmat suits. And yeah, it made it difficult to enjoy the last part of my vacation.
Yeah. And even like the beginning, Nani, like a volcano erupted, right? Like right before you're ready to take off.
Oh my gosh. It was so interesting. I remember that, Jen, I was telling you this back at the time. That was when I first bought JL's Kapwa tarot cards and I was going to try and learn how to like read them and, use them essentially. And the first card that I pulled was like the card of death. And it was like a week before I was supposed to go on the trip.
Oh my God.
Literally like a couple days later, the volcano erupted to all, which is about 30 or 45 minutes, I think, from where my family lives, who I was supposed to go visit the first leg of my trip. So that didn't get to happen because my flight got pushed back like 4 or 5 days, I think. And then once we got there, we were only there for like a week or so before COVID then hit. And now I understand the meaning of that card. Because at the time I was like, oh my God, should I go? Like, does this mean I'm going to die? But yeah, now I understand in hindsight, looking back at everything that's happened since then. And yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that I was out there when that happened. And then I traveled from right when COVID hit, I traveled from Philippines to Singapore. And even on that flight, I was like wearing my mask and wearing gloves and everything, like just being super careful. And I was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah. Well, the little time that you were there in the Philippines, how did that impact you?
I think I was at first like not really taking it seriously because I didn't know what it was. And I was just like, okay, like I'm on vacation. Like I really just don't want anything to disrupt my vacation. I'm here trying to connect with my roots and, like soak in the motherland. And I was really trying to not let anything get in the way of that. And then once I left Philippines and got to Singapore, because it was really just the last couple of days that I was in the Philippines. And when COVID first hit, then I was like, okay, this is kind of scary, like seeing everyone else take the precautions, because it hit in Asia first before it came to the United States. And then it seemed to like follow us back home when we came home. And so I was like, once I got home, that's when it soaked in that I was like, oh, this is something serious, like a global pandemic, which is something that I didn't know how to process at the time.
Oh, well, crazy. That's just crazy. I can't even believe that was like, that was a year and a half ago now at this point, since all of this
so
has
much
changed.
has happened since then.
Yeah. And, for me, it's like 2020 was going to be the year that I was going to start socializing in person and, getting to know all these events, and hopefully with Melody's help, like get to know the festivals, the local festivals, and all the good things that typically go on here. But obviously a lot has changed. And even as we get into this new normal, or another level of a different normal, it's interesting. There's like a level of anxiousness that I think even I feel trying to go out and socialize again. I mean, I was like, I have plans, as I mentioned in a previous episode, to go to Orlando, Florida in September. And I was talking to my family about possibly coming and visit. And my sister was like, oh, well, are you vaccinated? Like, are you vaccinated? Is Scott vaccinated? And either way, it's like, whether I am or not, it kind of just made me feel uncomfortable knowing that there's kind of this peer pressure in a sense, to conform a certain way so that, we can be in community with each other. But what if you don't agree to certain things, right? So it's an interesting time, to say the least. And, from that moment of you going to the Philippines to now, I feel like it's been very interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Melody. Obviously, this is obviously about Melody here. And Melody, so
can I add?
Yes.
So Nani, as you were talking, I was just like reflecting on, like why I made my project, like Rerooted Filipinas. And it happened, we're talking about national disasters, right? So do you remember in 2013 when Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines?
Yeah.
And that was the first major typhoon to hit land, and it was in the Philippines. And, the whole world was watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when I heard about it, I was giving a lecture on leadership, women in leadership, and on civil engagement, and actually doing something about it. And I just felt convicted to do something about it. So in that time, I helped to organize a fundraiser for millennials. And as millennials, we raised over $10,000 in 3 weeks.
Wow.
We had over 100 volunteers who actually caring, at that time, we're in our 20s, we didn't really care. Not that we didn't care, but it wasn't close to us. Kind of like Nani, when you were going to the Philippines, it was just I don't know what this means. And then you feel connected, you were
right
in this, monumental event. And so at the time in 2013, this was this monumental event, and people started feeling connected. So I helped raise this money, and then I invited myself to deliver it to the Philippines.
Wow.
Other groups that had raised a lot of more money,
had
a lot more money to raise, the older Filipinos. So I invited myself to go to the Philippines to drop it off. And while in the Philippines, a lot of the community was just who's this girl? How did she get picked? I'm I invited myself. I invited myself.
Yeah.
And so I remember talking to the governor of Tacloban, and, I told him about the fundraiser, and he's just well, why don't you bring some people back and we'll plant coconut trees and mangroves? And I was okay, let me finish my dissertation and I'll come back and do this. And he was just okay. And so I always had this in me, of coming back and bringing people to plant mangroves and coconut trees to to protect the land.
I love that.
From this devastation. So it took me a long time to finish my dissertation from then. That was I went in 2014. So 6 months after typhoon hit. It took me another 5 years to graduate with my PhD. But then it was just okay, 2019, graduated my PhD. Okay, I'm going to bring people. I'm going to the embassy, talking to all these people from all over the country, even other countries about hey, let's go back to the Philippines. Let's plant some coconut trees. Everyone's excited. I want people to be excited, going to Hawaii or going to. to Europe. Like, Philippines is just as amazing and just as rich in culture and just,
For sure.
if not more,
Definitely more.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot
we're
more.
biased over here, obviously.
There's a thing to be said about like planting your roots, not just like culturally, but like physically. Like I'm really into environment and environmental protection. So it's just like you're leaving a piece of you that has given you peace, if that makes sense. And so I don't know, it's just like this physical and like symbolic like metaphor in a way of like planting your roots and giving back and growing your roots.
Yeah, I love that. I wish I would have known about your organization and everything. I mean, even though you didn't get to make it happen in 2020, I think that at the time that I was trying to organize this trip to the Philippines that I went on, like I had expressed to Jen many times back then, that's really kind of the type of trip that I was looking for. I was looking to do activities like that and connect with organizations and, like go there to find myself essentially. And I ended up going with a group of my best friends who really just wanted to party, and so that was cool too, because I got kind of macroscopic view of lay of the land and I got to understand a couple of the different islands, but it wasn't really any of the stuff that I wanted to, that was like the goal of me going there or the purpose of me wanting to go there in the first place. It was a nice first trip and I did have a lot of fun, but immediately when I came back, I was like, I already need to plan another trip because I just didn't get to do anything that I wanted to do, such as something like that. And I think Jen was even telling me about some other organizations that she knew of that did similar activities or kind of field trip event like things. And so that is something that I definitely would be interested in, like post pandemic. I mean, I don't know how it will work now that I will have a baby and all, but
well, I definitely want it to be family friendly.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I already planned it.
Be
there. It's already outlined. Like we had
you just need the green light.
Had donated some flights.
Oh, wow. That's like amazing.
Philippine Embassy, Philippine Department of Tourism. They sponsored.
Good for you. So, you have some like real professional organizing skills.
Hopefully. I mean, because the ambassador has changed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like my connections are changing. So,
right.
Praying that it's still cool to like, and like, hey, you guys already signed off on this. Can we just continue?
Yeah.
Can we just pick up where we left off? Yeah.
It's like, you may not know me, but the last ambassador did. And
and he loved me and he featured me in Philippine Star. So
yeah. So hopefully you guys had a great relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, part of why I also wanted to bring Melody on the show is she's just quite the mover and shaker here locally. Because Melody, you were born and raised here in Virginia Beach. So let's go ahead and transition over to a little bit about your background and upbringing and how you identify of being a Filipino American. Talk a little bit about your family lineage, your upbringing here, and, what does it mean to be a Filipino American woman for you?
Right. So I think that's an interesting question because growing up Filipino American here in Hampton Roads or Virginia Beach, like East Coast Filipinos, we came here like 60s, 70s, 80s, like the big wave. Whereas like Hawaii or like California, they came like way earlier, right? Growing up, everyone I knew was first gen Filipino or like, parents migrated here. Like I had one friend who was different because her mom was born here. And like I didn't understand, like young at the time, I didn't like most of the people I was around was Ilocano. Most people like their dad was in the Navy and their mom was a nurse. So in my head, that was what Filipino meant. It wasn't until much later, like middle school, when I learned that like there's a lot of people who are like not Ilocano and that my Ilocano upbringing is not like all of Filipino. And it wasn't until like even my PhD that I realized that my experience as Filipino American is different than someone who might have been brought up in like the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's kind of a loaded question to me because I'm a counselor and I'm also a counselor educator. So I teach counselors in training. And so I developed a counseling Filipino theory based on my preconception of and growing up, right? But I didn't know that like not all Filipinos are Catholic or like not, like that some people are like third generation. Like the first time I met a third generation Filipino American, I was in my mid 20s.
Wow.
Like, that's East Coast. Like I didn't know.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And, when we ask this question, and I know I asked it in a very loaded way, but like when we answer this question, it's usually having people, talk about, let's say, oh, my parents are from the Philippines. They came through the military or what have you. They were like the last person we interviewed. They had diplomatic parents, so like she herself had a hard time kind of identifying if she was like a first, second generation Filipino American or actually an immigrant, in which she realized she was an immigrant when she was already in college. But I like how, you opened up with that self-awareness that, the East Coast is different from the West Coast, primarily because of that wave. Like you said, I didn't even know that information. I lived in California for 20 years, to know that, like, it kind of makes a lot of sense to me why there's so much movement, I think, in the Bay Area, Nani, right? Because there's a lot of Filipinos there and have been there for a long time. And to know that, like, let's say Filipino American history is incorporated in the schools there, where out here, it still feels like there's a lot of work to be done in a sense. I mean, I don't know, you can tell me, Melody, but like, I feel like it is different. It is very different. And I appreciate you opening up with that self-awareness of just how, I'm going to say different again, of how different it is in the West Coast and the East Coast. But anyway, continue.
That's funny and interesting that you said that. I'm also like part of the Asian Advisory Board here in Virginia. And so, it's my first time like really being involved in government. And like, I think it's really cool to know that our Secretary of Education is Asian American here in Virginia. And they have been developing a more like culturally competent and inclusive like curriculum, social studies curriculum. So I was really excited when California added Filipino American history to their curriculum. And that was years ago, but like we're starting to catch up, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that just so blows my mind, just kind of knowing where I lived and like what is happening out here and how things are starting to kind of like pick up what California has had for some time now. Nani, I'm just curious to know if you have any thoughts about this, knowing that, you were born, raised, and live and work, and now you're going to have a family in Oakland, California, knowing just a little bit about the East Coast.
Yeah, no, I think that we've touched on this in several of our interviews about the difference between kind of East Coast and West Coast Filipinos. And it seems like we just all really like live in our bubbles, And even for me, it took me a long time to realize or learn, I guess, the history that's here in California for Filipino Americans dating back, decades to like the farm workers movement, basically. And I just recently learned that Filipinos were some of the first people to migrate to America down in like Louisiana. So it's kind of like, yeah, again, we operate in our bubbles and we know what we know to be Filipino in the context of our own family and upbringing experience. For me, my family, I feel like is more, or the younger generations of my family from like my dad down are more Americanized. But there was that stark difference between like my grandma's and her brothers and sisters and my grandpa and his siblings down to, my dad's generation where they don't speak the language. They, assimilated pretty well into American life, even if most of them were still born in the Philippines. And so that's kind of what I interpreted it to mean to be a Filipino American, whereas the older generations obviously have a very different understanding of that. And they know this history, but they didn't pass it down necessarily. So again, it's through like interviewing people like you or people on a different side of the country that it really takes for us to get to know our own history and how we're connected. So yeah, the oral history part of it, I think for me is so important. And I just want to like lean into everything that you're telling me about the East Coast because I don't know,
Yeah, I often joke that Melody's my local tour guide. But she's
Just
more
your joke.
yeah. Yeah. It sounds like that's what your community tends to refer to you as, right? As like the local tour guide in a sense. But Melody, you are way more than that. And I just want to let our listeners know a little bit more about your background. So, you've spent over 20 years serving your community here in Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads. Virginia Beach is in Hampton Roads, is what I come to understand. And
Hampton Roads is just a made up metropolitan.
Okay.
You'll hear Hampton Roads, you'll hear coastal Virginia, you'll hear.
What's Tidewater? Is that coastal?
Tidewater was what it was called before it was Hampton Roads.
Got it. Okay. Because someone asked me like, oh, you live in Tidewater. And I'm like, do I?
Tidewater. And then, I don't know if you care about this local history.
I do. Go ahead.
So, what happened was we were Tidewater, right? And that's also not an official name.
Mm.
They call this region Tidewater. Another unofficial name is the Seven Cities. But I guess the business owners wanted something new, something different, something like catchy or something. So the rich people literally went around and started hey, you should call it this. And kind of started convincing people around and businesses to start calling it Hampton Roads.
Mm.
There's no official movement called Hampton Roads. It's very confusing because no one knows what we are. And so some people will call us Virginia Beach and surrounding areas. Some people will call us Norfolk and surrounding areas. There's no regional planning.
Wow.
So many groups.
I'm like, what do you type in Google Maps?
Yes, Virginia Beach.
Okay.
The actual city.
It's kind of like when I think about San Diego, there's so many cities with San Diego is a big general way to talk about SoCal, but there's so many cities within it. And depending on where you live, there's a place called, Bonita, California. And, that's where all the ranches are and horse owners and stuff. And they don't always necessarily identify with San Diego. No, we're Bonita, even though San Diego envelops, Bonita. Yeah. So I kind of feel like that's what it is here, where as a whole, we can call it Hampton Roads, but really depending on where you live and maybe how long you've lived here, some people might call it Tidewater. Some people might call it, for me, I call it Virginia Beach because I'm fairly new and that's literally where I live. But I also, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, Norfolk is also part of Virginia Beach because of, my lack of knowledge, I kind of group it all in there, but it is very different. And I like how in an odd way, this place kind of has an identity crisis.
It has an identity crisis. I've been to too many meetings on this crisis and trying to solve it. The new thing is coastal Virginia. That's the that they're trying to push everyone towards. So.
Okay. Coastal Virginia. Well, anyway, thank you for that history lesson, Melody. I also just want to, let our listeners know just how incredible you are. You have been serving this community for a long time, not just mentoring AAPI or at-risk youth, but also organizing the Filipino community events, fundraising for Filipinos affected by national disasters, like you mentioned just recently, and also performing in the AAPI Art and Cultural Festival. So you are just all about it. You're just all about being involved in this community. So feel free to let us know, what does it mean for you today? For me to just read all this, what does it mean for you to know that you've accomplished all these things and you're so invested in this community? And I'm saying this from an outsider, so hopefully this helps you appreciate all the good work you've done up until this point.
It doesn't feel like a lot, but then when you hear it out loud, it's wow, that's a lot. I hear that when I hear about what everyone else does, and I'm like, man, they're doing a lot. But then when I say what I do, they're like, man, you're doing a lot. I'm like, really? Am I? But I guess it's important to note, I knew I was different from preschool. I guess it's funny you said what's Tidewater? So one of the organizations my family is a part of is the United Ilocano Association of Tidewater. And so I literally grew up around a lot of Ilocanos too. But I knew age 4 going to preschool, I was different. My neighbors, there were words I would say that were not in English. And I thought it was English because I spoke English, right? And they were like, what are you trying to say? And I'm like, suput. I'm asking suput. And they're like, what's that? It's it took me a while to be a plastic bag, or even now, basura, what's trash can? What is it in English again?
Right.
I think that was probably one of the first moments I knew it was different. And so I started thinking about culturally how I was different. And analyzing and processing this from like probably when I was like 4. So then I started helping my friends figure it out, right? Like, what does it mean to be Filipino American? Like one thing I appreciate about my parents is, and I didn't find this out until like more recently, is when they migrated to America. Well, my dad was here first, and then that's a cute story if we ever get to it one day. But when my parents migrated to America, like they had a conversation about how they wanted to raise their kids. And one thing that they wanted to do that was different from how they were raised is they wanted like my brother and I to like have a voice and have an opinion. We got in trouble for those voices and those opinions, but like we were also raised to like, think critically, speak up. And so I started helping my friends, figure it out because like some of them didn't have that, I guess, encouragement. I know.
Nope.
My best friend hates being Filipino. She hates it. I haven't talked to her about it now, like now that she's a mom, but like definitely before she was a mom, like she hated it because she didn't know how to talk to adults, like 4 years old talking to adults. And she graduated college is stumbling upon her words to her first boss because she didn't know how to like stand up for herself.
Self-advocate. Yeah.
Yeah. Self-advocate. She was very upset about that. But like, I like started helping a lot, and I was already a counselor by then, but like, I was like helping a lot of my friends, like navigate like how they feel about these different identities that they hold on to. So now as a therapist, that's like probably my favorite population I work with is like about a third of my clients, or at my practice, we call them patients, but about a third of them are Asian Americans, not just Filipinos, like trying
Love
to
it.
That. Yeah. And it's very healing. I follow this Filipino therapist in California. I like message her, like, kind of fangirling, like, hey, I'm a therapist too. And she's like older. But she was just saying like one of the stories she said, and I don't remember if she said it directly to me or if it was one of her posts, but like it felt like she was talking to me. So I'm just going to say she said it. Like sometimes you experience things and it just feels like.
Yes, it speaks to you.
Oh, yeah.
She said she had a client and she just had to tell her like, it's going to be okay, like in Tagalog. And like for that person, that's the healing that they needed. Hear it like in Tagalog. But for Philams, it's kind of like, and I've gotten this a lot, like I needed to hear it from someone who looked like me or someone who, is from like one of recently someone told me, she was just like, yeah, you're like my sister's age. So you're like my ate. And it's like, just hearing it from you, like, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. I'm valid.
Yeah.
Like it was healing.
Yeah. So having that cultural alignment, I think, especially in like a therapy space or a mentorship space is so important. And so I love that you have really taken that on. Like, it sounds like you were raised with a really strong sense of self, and you're hyper aware of that from such a young age. You like had a pretty tight grasp on, okay, I know who I am and I know I'm different. And I know that other people who I can relate to are probably having this weird internal conversation with themselves. So let me help them out, because I know that it's going to be received differently coming from me. Yeah.
You made it sound really easy. I just wanted to emphasize it was hard. It wasn't like,
you figured it out.
Like I accept it. Like, no, not that at all.
I just love how, just like what Nani had said, you were taught that self-advocacy at a young age, because you're right. There's so many people I think about for myself where a lot of issues were swept under the rug, and I can name a number of them, but I'll save that for another time. But, I didn't really learn self-advocacy till my late 20s. And that's even still something in my young 30s that I'm struggling with. I mean, actively being in therapy for, and why I have a podcast show such as this, to find that verbiage, that language, that conviction to self-advocate, So I just love that you were raised right in a sense, or you were raised in a way that I think helped you better adapt, I think, in American society, because it is hard. And you kind of sort of, I think about just all the self-doubt I carried for myself and the fear of what it would mean to speak up, And so I just love that. I love that you were instilled that early on, and how you, in a way, add that to your work today.
Yeah. I mean, like saying it out loud, that's like super oversimplification, right? Like my parents wanted to do that. But of course, like they're also stuck in some of their ways.
Right.
So
Right.
it was still hard, it was
Right.
growing up. It was just maybe a little less hard.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a process and, a journey to get to that point. The point is that you got there and that you are, passing on.
And becoming, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
yes,
Of
yeah.
course, we're ever evolving. We were just interviewing my dad actually on our private podcast platform, Chismas with Jen and Nani. And he was talking about how kind of the vision, I guess, that he had for me when I was born and how he similarly wanted me to grow up really strong in my sense of self and knowing that, something that he said about not feeling the need for anyone else to have to justify my existence or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because I've always really struggled with that, like intrinsically, I agree. Like, I do think that he, looking back on my childhood, did try to instill that attitude in me. And it is in there. It is a huge part of me, but it has been a learning process to like pull it out and use it, So I think that there's something to be said too for those like intimate relationships that you have with your parents and how they try to shape that as a part of your identity. And then also versus how you exercise it, in your real life when you step outside the four walls that are your home. So yes, I can also acknowledge that it was a process for you to get to where you are, but it seems like along the way, you've been doing what you can to pass on what you're learning or the tighter grasp that you get through your own experience to others to help them do the same. And that's just really admirable.
I guess that's part of my social entrepreneurship. When I knew what that was, I was like, oh, that's me. So I don't have knowledge and like skills away for free, right? But it's important to hear. It's important to hear that you matter.
Yes.
That you are valued, that what you say has value, that you have a gift to give to the world. I don't think, that's emphasized enough. I mean, like Filipino American or not, like it's not like so many people. And maybe I'm saying this like as a counselor. And so these are the people I talk to on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But, we deserve to take up space.
Yeah.
And I like that you're, not just speaking from your personal experiences, but on behalf of your patients, right? Like just knowing firsthand, talking to these people almost every day. Cause I know you've been doing a lot of therapy during COVID since we're stuck at home anyway. I know you've been working a lot. We've had these conversations, but I love that you can speak that with conviction, knowing that like, these are real issues. Like it is hard for some people to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I matter. My voice matters. Like I am allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to own it. I think it's a very common theme that a lot of us, struggle with. And to even go to something like therapy is quite taboo for a lot of people in our community. So the fact that, a third of your patients are, of Asian descent and you're being that voice for them, you're being that face, you're showing that representation in therapy to say you matter. And you're right. It's like sometimes it takes a certain person, someone that looks like you, to say something that maybe someone else said, but because it's you, it sticks with you that much more. It's like, well, you said that. So if you said that, like, I believe it compared to, let's say someone else saying it that doesn't have the same skin color as I. So I just think it's beautiful work that you're doing. And as I mentioned, I know that you're doing a lot. I know you're working a lot in therapy right now. Just give us a quick snapshot of what that looks like. Because I remember last time we talked, you're working a ton of hours, more so than, let's say, like the average therapist, or more so than you feel like you should be right now.
Well, okay. So when I was in grad school, like over a decade ago, they really instilled in us that most people don't have the emotional capacity to be a therapist full time.
Mm-hmm.
And like just knowing me and like all the things that I like to do, like I'm also an event planner. I love organizing events, fundraisers. Like I love my special projects. I'm a writer of all sorts, right? Researcher. I'm a professor. Like I knew going into the profession, I did not want to be a full-time therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Funny because it costs a lot of money. Right? So I knew I didn't want to be a full-time therapist. But because of COVID, I was just like, oh, well, I'm not going anywhere anyway. So I took on a full-time caseload. I since then like decreased a little bit. So I'm a little bit under full-time right now.
Oh, good.
but I still teach. I still am the secretary and chair on the advisory board, or like health committee chair, not the chair. I still like freelance write. I still go to my own therapy, and I still try to see friends. and I have a husband. And so I try to spend time with him too.
You know what? I'd like to say, and I think part of, and maybe this is just kind of like being in your 30s and like not having kids. Like I just in general, because I can speak on that, not having kids myself. It's like, I feel like we can do so much. I'm not saying that, parents can't do it, but it's like sometimes when I hear people doing so much, it has a lot to do with not having kids sometimes, right? Like just being able to have that flexibility in the meantime, just like how Nani is here with me doing all these interviews before her next season of motherhood arrives. But, it's a lot of good work. And I heard someone say this really beautifully. Actually, it was Gina from Make It Marico, the vet planner, Nani, in the Bay Area. She wrote a whole blog about, sometimes if we're not mothers, we become community moms. We are giving back. We are helping other people in our community. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing, Melody, is really just, I'm not saying that you don't want to be a mom, but it kind of makes me feel like because of all this time you have, it's like, comparatively, it's like you can do all of this incredible work. You can be this busy, and your husband's busy too anyway. He goes to work too. So it's like you can fill in that time with all of the, things that you do that make you so multifaceted.
It's funny you say that too, because I feel like I always have this internal battle. Like I lived in Thailand for a little bit where I leisurely worked, and I got to just, I had a mango man, like 50 cents for a whole cut up mango, or my mango man was like, I don't know, 30 cents, but he was the cheapest one, but it was so good. Like, exploring, like I miss traveling. Like I usually travel like every year somewhere. And I haven't done that in a while. And so it's like this battle between like all this work that like I know like my heart is set to do, and like wanting to just vacation.
Well, I mean, tell us a little briefly about when you toured Asia to teach. And we talked a lot about this offline as well, where there was a time where you positioned yourself in a way where you could do that for free. And I think that's worth mentioning as well, considering how you are a social entrepreneur. And I think it's worth sharing that perspective, kind of knowing like what you can do in order to be able to do something such as that, being able to tour around Asia.
Okay. I'm going to rewind a little bit to like when like 5-6 years old. Since I was 5 or 6, I knew I was meant for something big. I just didn't know what it was. And I'm in this constant state of discovering and rediscovering what that means. And I don't feel like there's like a single answer. I think it's just like this building that I'm doing.
For sure.
And so in 2015, I have lupus. So that's a big part of my identity and who I am. Not so much my identity. I take that back. I am not going to claim that.
Yes.
I have lupus, and that's a big part of my story.
Yes.
I mean, okay, maybe I shouldn't say it, but like I'm about to cry just saying it. Like I've been battling like this big ass lupus flare for the past year, and like it's starting to like crack me.
Man.
But my last big lupus flare was 2015. I ended up in the hospital for like over a week, and it like really made me reevaluate like what I wanted to do. At the time, I wasn't in a job I was not happy with. Like I love the work I was doing. It just wasn't the work I wanted to do. Like, it was definitely, I should have just stayed for 2 years like I intended, and I stayed for way longer than that. So I wasn't happy in that job. And like, it was kind of like an excuse to not pursue like what I really wanted to do, which is like I'm doing now. It's just like all the things. And I'm still not really doing what I want to do. Like, I have my Mellow Mahalo. It's a soft launch brand, right? Like that's one thing I wanted to do in 2020. I wanted to do a hard launch of Mellow Mahalo. Mellow Mahalo is my brand that like I teach, I do community like teachings, I do like business trainings, I just like share information, right? It stands for purpose, love, and gratitude. Like that's kind of like pillars that I stand on. Like Mellow is like melody. We all have a song.
And it's your name.
And it's your name, yes.
Mahal is love in Tagalog. And mahalo is like thank you, gratitude in Hawaiian. And
wow.
It started off as a blog, actually. I like stopped paying for the website, so it doesn't exist anymore. But it was when, after I got out of the hospital, I heard about this opportunity to go to Hawaii. And it was this international leadership program, which they changed it now. Like it used to be this 9-month program. You lived in Hawaii for half the time, and then you had the opportunity to apply for funding for a project. So I got in. They don't usually take Americans, but because of the work I've done in the Philippines, I think that's why
they made an exception.
Yeah, they made an exception. And it was really an amazing time. It was the first time living in Hawaii. It was the first time I was not in the minority. And it was an amazing.
Yeah.
I got to like just learn to learn. There were no grades. It was just learning.
Love that.
It was amazing. And then I applied for my project. So what was really cool about this program, so this is at the East West Center, is called the Asia Pacific Leadership Program. Like all these leaders from Asia, and then me, like 24 people, I think we were from 13 or 14 countries, different disciplines, pretty much mid-career. It was amazing. We all had like different projects and different interests. So we were able to collaborate. Like I had this business model for Melo Mahalo that I created like, I don't know, almost a decade ago now. It's going to launch. So talk about it. Maybe one day it will actually launch. Not criticize is not the right word, but like I got to present it to
critiqued. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I got to present it to all these leaders from around the world. And like, they were like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, what? Like, you think this is amazing? Like, you're like this big person. And so like, it was just such an incredible experience. So then, and like part of my social entrepreneurship is I want to make mental health accessible.
Yeah.
Like,
I love that.
It's not accessible. It's elitist. It's very Western. It's not really culturally competent in many ways. And so I'm trying to like battle this or like balance this like idea of like, well, one of my identities is I am a counselor, but one of my identities is, like I'm Filipino, like, right? Like that fit exactly. So like, how do I make this fit? So one of the ways I do that is I give trainings to companies on like mental wellness, on stress, on identity, on, just like whatever they need. And so like, I haven't really done anything much since the pandemic, but like, I'll do it for schools, I'll do it for organizations, for businesses, like just whoever like reaches out. Like it's very word of mouth right now, but I've been doing it for forever. And so I was just like, what if I did this in the Philippines, or not Philippines, but in Asia? Like we had to do at least 2 countries. I was able to go to 4.
Wow.
What if I did this in Asia? So like you write a proposal and it's like, it was rated by 11 people. So everyone who turned in a proposal, like it was rated. There was only 7 slots. And so I did this thing teaching mental wellness around Asia. And most of my comments and feedback from the raters, like if these people are leaders from Asia, are like, it's not going to work.
Wow.
Approve. Or not recommended. It's not going to work in Asia. Even the mentor they assigned me was just like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Wow. This isn't prioritized. Like,
why are you going to give me, or are you going to assign me a mentor who's going to tell me like, this isn't going to work. Right. So, but probably by the skin of my teeth, my proposal got accepted.
Yes.
So I was able to give workshops and trainings, on mental health, but also on environment in like Sri Lanka, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines.
Wow. That's like, amazing.
There was really no direction or like no requirements. So like, I just kind of was just like, hey, like I just reached out. Some of it was cold calling. Some of it was just like meeting random people like at the bus or something, or the airport, or like reaching out to random people that I might have known. Like one of my best friends lives in Thailand. So she was able to connect me with people who connected with you, with people who connected with
Nice.
Me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like literally a lot of networking, but it was so fun. And I got to eat mango every day.
For 30 cents.
30
sounds amazing.
cents. Yeah. So, and not only did it work, everyone wanted me to come back. Like everyone was just,
right.
We need this, why don't you move here? So like me wants to just kind of be like half here, half there. And I've always been, and this is like way before my Asian tour, I've always wanted just to make enough money so that I can do free things like this. Like whether it's here in the States or like abroad, like to me, money is just I like money, but to me, money is a like means to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm glad my husband feels the same.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's very culturally, it's easy to kind of like villainize money in a way, or, kind of see it as the root of all evil. But, working in finance myself and with my husband, it's like, it's a means. It's not meant to dictate your life. It's meant to propel your life forward, into things that you actually want to do, So I appreciate you sharing all of that, Melody. I don't know if you have any thoughts on just anything that Melody shared.
No, I'm just soaking in your experience and really in awe of how you were able to kind of finesse your way through Asia, giving these trainings. And I can imagine that, at first submitting those proposals, especially over there in Asia, I think the climate is different than over here in America, where at least now, throughout the pandemic, people are really prioritizing those things in their organizations and their workplaces. Learning about how identity plays into employee engagement and retention and all that stuff. But over in Asia, I can imagine that that's not so prioritized for them. And so I think it's really impressive that you were able to advocate for yourself hard enough to kind of get in there. And then once you did, it seemed like it was really this eye-opening experience for those organizations to be like, oh, this is something that we should be prioritizing and really thinking about. And it sounds like you really made a difference in those spaces.
What was really cool is like I was giving workshops for like kids, but also like adults.
Yeah.
For this one school system, like they were just like, wait a minute, who are you? They just like organized super quick, like a school district wide, like student leadership conference. So it was like a 4-hour training for students. It was their first one. Like, how cool is it? I was able to give the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least 2 of the workshops, no one spoke English.
Wow.
Or like 1 person spoke English.
Yeah.
I stayed at my friend's house in Vietnam, and like she went to work and her family doesn't speak English. So that was an experience too. But then she like set up this workshop where I taught like kids from elementary school about feelings. And it was like this school at the outskirts of the city of like Hanoi. So spoke English, and like they heard about this foreigner in town. Everyone brought their kids over. So I'm here teaching about feelings to that don't know English. And so like, that was really exciting, like just the communication, like figuring out communication, because like there's this common understanding, right? With like movement, with colors, with, just like pointing, like
Yeah.
it was fun and interesting. But yeah, like government officials, business leaders, like entrepreneurs, like there wasn't anyone specifically I was targeting, but because I worked in the school system as a suicide counselor. Like I've worked in the community service board, like I worked in businesses and I gave trainings, I worked in academia. Like I had enough experience in different populations to be able to give these workshops to.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we have this endless resume, decorated resume that you had, Melody. And, obviously I'm just so glad that we're friends. I'm so glad to know you and even have you as a resource when it comes to these, types of things and the type of work that you're doing. And I applaud you for doing all of that. And I'm just excited to, like I said, be your friend and continue to be part of your journey and hear you progress. I'm just soaking in everything you're sharing, Melody, because I feel like since I've met you, every time I learn something new about you, I'm like, man, she's doing something amazing. Wow, she's doing something else amazing. And I know we have this mutual respect for each other and the work that we do. So it's just, I think this is us just kind of fangirling each other right about now. But, in closing, I thought we can wrap up by talking about the traditional healing that you've learned, including Filipino healing traditions, that you think should be more incorporated in health and in mental health overall. And I guess kind of close up with that, the importance of that, and knowing that being Filipino is enough And our healing traditions are enough, if not more than enough. So would you like to close up on that?
Yeah, so I feel like we can have a whole podcast on that alone, but and I've been a counselor for over 10 years. I'm a counselor educator. So I teach at the master's and doctorate level, like other counselors. But the deeper I go into the profession, and I don't want to knock the profession because I love being a counselor. It's just that like the more like the deeper I'm going into it, like the more I'm realizing how Western counseling is and how like we're like the only culture, like the Western culture is like the only culture that like separates like mental health and physical health and spiritual health, where like as Filipinos, like we have healing traditions that maybe were erased or forgotten, or I'm not sure if like forgotten is the right word, but like hidden because of like the 400 years of colonization. I'm definitely not an expert in Filipino healing traditions, but I do know we have our ancestors. I do know that like Hilot, like people think of Hilot, people think of massage, right? What people might not know is Hilot was way more than that. Like it was this energy medicine where the massage was only one part of it.
Wow.
It was an understanding of how the body works, how the body, mind, and spirit all work together. And it was very intuitive. And a lot of Filipinos, like we're very intuitive, we're very empathic, we're very feeling oriented. But there's like this disconnect because we're taught not to feel and we're taught not to share. So then it leaves us with like all these emotions that like we don't know what to do with, and with all these feelings that we don't know how to express. So the more I learn about it, I hope to share it like with other people that we do, like as Filipinos, as Asians, as women, like we have something to give. Like that's more than just anything we can say, more than anything we can do. Like our presence alone is enough to be healing. And once we can utilize that and learn how to utilize that and learn how to appreciate that and know and respect it and know what it is, I think there will be a lot more healing in our community. So I guess just leaving you with, we are more than just our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. We're an integration of all of those things. So there's a saying in the mental health world, there is no health without mental health. So like that is so true, like even like in the context of culture.
Wow. And when you talked a little bit about how we sort of separate like the emotions from, I mean, the best way I can describe it is almost like having the separation between logic and emotions, like, you know, a separation between your mind and your heart. And you didn't say it that way, but that's how I heard it. And that just really touched me because, you know, I think being a hyphenated American, you always feel like you're trying to find that balance. You're always trying to figure out like, okay, should I assimilate here? Like, what should I code switch to today? You know, and so just to hear that and to know that we are actually more than enough and we can take up space and, you know, and all of our multifacetedness is just, you know, it really speaks to me. And I, you know, it's funny because we didn't like know what the life lesson was going to be, but I'm glad this was sort of the case. Nani, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think that that's a beautiful note to close on and something that you, the listener, can take the next week until we release the next episode to really contemplate and think about is how, as a part of our like Filipino identity, we're kind of just wired for connection and we are very connected just by nature to each other. And then the disconnect between kind of that inherent nature that we have as Filipinos or the kapwa, our shared identity, and how we're culturally raised to not show our emotions and to push those things under the rug and to, you know, we have this pressure or this expectation that's imposed on us to just act like we have it all together and not acknowledge when we need help. And so I think that that's you said it really beautifully the way that you outlined that. And I think that that's something for us to all take home today from this episode and think about.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. Ooh, that was good. Okay, I'm not going to ruin it anymore. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. Well, Melody, first and foremost, thank you for being my friend. And thank you for being on the show. And thank you for just I'm just in admiration of the good work that you do and continue to do. And I know that there's going to be a lot of great things that you're going to do, especially when things open up again. And hopefully you'll be able to go back to the Philippines. In the meantime, this was such a wonderful conversation. Remember, to our listeners, if you want to reach out to Melody, you can find her on Instagram at Melo Mahalo. That's MELOMAHALO. On Instagram right now. Go ahead and reach out to her and let her know that you listened to her episode and you really like what she had to share. You could also reach out to us, 415-484-8329. Again, that's 415-484-8329, or email, Jen at tifaproject.com, Nani at tifaproject.com, or our website, tifaproject.com. We have a lot of links, and that's a lot of call to actions. I hope I'm not overwhelming our listeners. And of course, if you want to support our show, one more call to action, you can check us out at biasboba.com and subscribe to our private podcast show, Chismis with Jen and Nani. Okay, I'm done. We love you all. Thank you all so much for being here. Nani, thank you for co-hosting with me as always.
You're welcome.
And to our listeners, we love you all, and we'll chat with you in the next episode. Tune in next time.
Bye.